Alrighty guys, it is Qaaman here today, and in today's video I want to talk to you guys about something that has been on my mind for over the last month. And this is actually something that I recently discussed on an editing live stream. And a lot of you guys were showing a lot of support in that live stream and saying that I should actually talk about this in an actual YouTube video. And I never thought I would, but here we go. Dragon Ball history is repeating itself all over again. And this is not the first time this has happened, but to be specific for Dragon Ball YouTubing and the Dragon Ball atmosphere, everything that happened before is legitimately just happening all over again. And what do I mean by this specifically? Well, let's have a little bit of story time, and I'm going to take you back to the beginning of Dragon Ball YouTubing because I'm not saying this to brag, but I'm effectively the first real Dragon Ball YouTuber that, did discussions. There were some Dragon Ball YouTubers that existed, like SSJ Goshin and Vegito 1089, but I was really the first person to grow naturally and organically within the YouTube system with virtually no help in an era where nobody was really talking about this. And because of that, I say that not to talk about, but get on your knees and worship me as the Lord Qaaman that tells you what to do. No. I'm saying that because I have credibility in what I'm saying by my observations of how I'm analyzing how the community is going to develop after this. And in saying all of this, guys, in the early days of Dragon Ball YouTubing, it was a very different landscape. Dragon Ball was pretty much in a drought, where there was really no new Dragon Ball stuff that came out. Of course, you always have new games and stuff, and really, around the time that I started making Dragon Ball videos, the most recent thing that we had gotten that was quote-unquote big was Yo Son Goku and His Friends Return. The funny thing about Yo Son Goku and His Friends Return is the fact that that's something that still only, really hardcore Dragon Ball fans knew about, because if you ask the casual Dragon Ball fan that, just watches the anime and dub on TV, they don't really look into the manga, they don't really look into the Daisenju or, Toriyama's interviews to get more out of the series. They really just look at the show and move on with their lives. The average fan probably didn't even know Yo Son Goku and His Friends Return ever existed, let alone cared about it. So when you factor that in, Dragon Ball was on a huge hiatus. Dragon Ball had a huge boom in the whole Toonami era, then we had GT, and then after that, we went into the rerun era, and we really hadn't had new Dragon Ball for years, and for Japan specifically, the drought was even bigger because we got everything later on in America, so the desire to have Dragon Ball was off the charts, and I made videos simply because of the fact that as a fan, I had desires to talk about these things that I've always kind of wondered about Dragon Ball, and it's kind of crazy to think that when I initially made my YouTube channel, I was actually trying to be a Yugi-tuber, as weird as it is to say that, and I kind of started a whole other thing. It's kind of a little crazy when life does that, when you try to aim for doing something, but then you end up finding something else. You look for this type of mineral, but then you start and discover another mineral that nobody else was doing at the time. It's just kind of fascinating how that works out. But to go apart from myself here, guys, and going back into how the community was, there were pretty much no other people that were really doing this outside of less than a handful. The term Dragon Ball YouTuber didn't exist. And it was really just myself and Blackened Fist who were even attempting to kind of do videos like this. And to make a joke about Blackened Fist, he wasn't even uploading frequently back then either, so let alone now. So the point that I'm trying to get at is, back in the day, when I would do a Dragon Ball video, it was one of those things where I would do a topic once a month, every 3 weeks or something like that. And in the beginning, I wasn't really getting a lot of views. It was just something that I was doing for fun on the side in college. And all of a sudden, I just started to get a lot more traction out of nowhere. And I learned from reading comments that all of this happened because people had the same desires that I did. People missed Dragon Ball. People really had a deep thirst and hunger for the series the way that I did, and I was the personification of what many people wanted, to have these conversations, but in the YouTube kind of format. And then fast forward to the future when Battle of Gods comes out, it feels like that was the first awakening of the Dragon Ball community because we were getting a new movie. you know, and it was an original movie that was quote-unquote canon, and I don't want to get into canon stuff today. I've already talked about how there really is no canon in Dragon Ball anymore. Dragon Ball just creates whatever it wants, and we have to consume it. But the point that I'm trying to get at is Battle of Gods came out, and then eventually Resurrection of F came out, and then, to put the icing on the cake, we ended up with Dragon Ball Super. And it was kind of like an incremental increase in interest, just building up over and over and over again, until we finally got a new Dragon Ball show. And when the Dragon Ball show came out, everybody just jumped right on the bandwagon, and all of a sudden, all of these Dragon Ball YouTubers just appeared out of nowhere and started discussing Dragon Ball in numbers that we haven't seen. And you know what's the crazy thing about it, guys? History is now repeating itself, because once Super ended, pretty much most of Dragon Ball YouTubers that were just talking about Dragon Ball during Super faded away. I stuck around. I wasn't as active as I was before, but I still made videos. Other creators were still active, and really, we're kind of in the same place that we were at the beginning. Now, granted, there are more people today talking about Dragon Ball than there were when I started making videos, for very obvious reasons. I mean, obviously the community grows, and that's a natural part of things, and Team 4-Star clearly had a huge impact on the Dragon Ball landscape, but I don't really look at them as a Dragon Ball YouTube channel. They're more of parodies, but what I mean by Dragon Ball YouTubers, I'm talking about people that like do discussions and like more outside things other than mostly focusing on the parody element. But before anything, I mean, Team 4-Star really was, you know, the zeitgeist, you could say, of Dragon Ball for a while, because their humor reignited a lot of the interest that a lot of Dragon Ball fans have. But going back to Dragon Ball Super, we're kind of at a crossroads right now, you know, with Dragon Ball Daima as compared to Dragon Ball Super, where a lot of the people that jumped on the bandwagon have died off. We haven't had Super in years. The manga's still going. We've had movies in the meantime, so it's very similar to what I said with Dragon Ball Super, where you have Battle of Gods, then you have Resurrection of F, just like we had Dragon Ball Super Broly, and then we had Dragon Ball Superhero. I don't like saying Super Superhero because it sounds so stupid. But the point that we're trying to get at is, we had the two little movies that kind of give us, like, you know, a teaser of what's to come, and then we get a completely new series that comes after this. And the thing is that Super's still technically continuing because the manga's still going on, and I definitely feel like it's a bummer that we're, at least for the foreseeable future, not expecting to get a Moro arc or a Granola arc animated, because I truly believe in my heart that those are the best arcs of Dragon Ball Super. Now, granted, whether you compare the anime to the manga and compare all arcs and double the amount because you have to compare the anime version to the manga version, that's a whole other conversation for another day. But to just give you a little bit of context, it's just like talking about the Zamasu arc. I personally think that in the anime version of Super, the Zamasu arc is the best. But if you look at the manga adaptation, I think that that's actually the worst arc in Dragon Ball Super. I feel like Toyotaro took a lot of liberties with the Zamasu arc in the manga, and I feel like it was significantly worse than it was in the anime. So, it's one of those things where people wanted Super, we're getting Daima, and I feel like this is how it all began, all over again, where there's a drought, there are movies that come out in between, fans are starting to increase their interest again, and lo and behold, guess what's gonna happen? I predict that when Dragon Ball Daima comes out, you are going to see a whole bunch of Dragon Ball YouTubers that either reappear or just come into existence that never existed before to try to market and capitalize off of all of the Dragon Ball Daima hype. It's going to be a web series, so we're not expecting it to be or reach the heights that Dragon Ball Super got, but they're going to stick around, run whatever they can get out of the series, make their money, and then they're going to disappear. And what's going to happen again? All of the OG people who still consistently talked about Dragon Ball for all of these years are going to stick around online, and we're going to continue creating content about Dragon Ball until the next boom comes again. And it really goes to show you that, you know, in life, you kind of see certain things. And I'm just going to be brutally honest with you. A lot of the people that I made Dragon Ball videos with, they don't even really exist on the platform anymore, you know? And it's kind of crazy because a lot of them had fairly large to large channels, even larger channels than me for some of them. And it's just kind of crazy to believe that, you know, there are a few that stick around and most will move. You know, you don't have too many pillars. And looking at this whole situation, guys, I think ultimately that with different changes, like obviously there's still going to be more Dragon Ball YouTubers than there were in the original beginning, but we're going through pretty much the exact same era that we went through when Dragon Ball Super came. And, you know, Dragon Ball YouTubing, I feel like, is kind of at a crossroads where it's really evolving in its own new direction. For the better, I would actually say, where content is transforming itself completely differently from what we had years ago. And I actually think the community is growing. But at the same time, though, I have to admit that I do think that a lot of the OG people that are going to come back will provide a lot. But then you're also going to have the clickbaiters that are going to come in and just ruin the franchise, because you know what they do. They're going to come in, create fake information about Daima, and produce all of this stuff. And it's going to be positive and negative all over again, for better and for worse.